Sometimes you think you've got the movie pegged, you can see who the villain is because look at them twirling their mustache with their top hat and cane. Oh, the evil of it up. Oh wait, it wasn't them at all. Huh. Well, this is a list about that. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror movies that switch villains. Number 10. The Platform. The rich elite are set up as the antagonists of Galder Gatzalu Orucha's class-conscious Spanish thriller The Platform, in which people are trapped inside a vertical prison through which a smorgasbord of food descends, serving each level until those at the bottom are left with nothing, and yet they wind up playing second fiddle to that most classic of all evils, human nature. Political commentary aside, the people who make the food and run the building are never seen, and in fact many of the prisoners trapped inside the structure have chosen to be there in exchange for something they need. In protagonist Goreng's, Ivan Masang, case, a university diploma. As such, it is these very prisoners who end up being the worst part of the whole experience, terrorizing and cannibalizing and assaulting each other, making no effort to unify against their supposed oppressors, but actively creating an unlivable situation for so many. Big Brother may be watching, but in terms of actual unexpected villainy, it spends the film on the sidelines. Number 9. Halloween Ends. David Gordon Green worked wonders with his Halloween revival trilogy, dragging the film series back out of the muck that it spent so many years languishing in, and making it appealing and relevant for contemporary audiences in search of an old-fashioned scare. As with the first two entries, Michael Myers was supposed to be the headline villain for the final part of the trilogy. Halloween ends, and yet he winds up taking a back seat for most of the film. The Shape gives way to young impersonator and all-round upstart Corey Cunningham, a brand new villain who has been infected with the same evil and harbours lofty aspirations of taking Michael's mantle. Corey goes so far as to literally wrest the iconic Shatner mask from Michael's hands and wear it for a bloody but ultimately short-lived rampage in the film's third act. Michael returns at the very end of the movie, just in time for his own death, but it is very much Corey's film, whether fans liked it or not. Number 8. Heathers. Veronica Sawyer is just your average downtrodden 80s movie high schooler until she becomes a member of the uber-popular, obnoxiously exclusive clique known as the Heathers. While her name alone should exclude Veronica from membership, she nevertheless becomes part of the group, only to pine for her days of relative anonymity. Enter JD, a bad boy with the power to extract Veronica from the clique and exact revenge for all of their spiteful misdeeds. Although the bulk of the teen comedy horror's plot centers around Veronica getting revenge on the titular Heathers, JD winds up being the true villain of the piece. Wielding a gun, faking suicides, and just generally taking things way too far, JD ends his reign as Westerberg High's trenchcoat in residence by blowing himself up with an IED intended for the entire school. Sure, JD's heart was somewhat in the right place, but his head was somewhere totally else, and no matter what the everyday villainous Heathers did pales in comparison to his plans to put school out forever. Number 7. The Babysitter, Killer Queen. McGee's original black comedy slasher The Babysitter, about, you guessed it, a babysitter with sacrificial plans for her young charge, wasn't really the event it could have been, neither reinventing nor redefining any of the tropes it leaned on. All of this changed with the arrival of sequel Killer Queen 2 years later, which broke out into the wider world while taking everything good about the first film and turning it up to 11. 2 years after his babysitter, B, played by Tamara Weaving, and her satanic cult tried to kill him, Cole Johnson is still suffering the reprisals of that fateful night, with everyone, parents and the 5-0 included, believing he had a psychotic break. But that doesn't stop B's gang from coming after him again in order to bring her back from the dead. Although the plot revolves around the performing of a ritual and resurrection of the first movie's main villain, when she finally arrives, she's had a change of heart. Thus, B helps Cole defeat her old friends and Cole's ex-best friend, the true villains of the film, before sacrificing herself for the greater good. Aww. Number 6. Prometheus. Pivoting wildly from an initial position of having nothing to do with the iconic Alien brand, the first film in Ridley Scott's new Alien trilogy promised an array of pre-xenomorph creatures, viruses, and horrors, with the Weyland-Yutani Corporation lurking in the background. Set in the dying days of the 21st century, Prometheus follows the crew of the titular spaceship as they seek out the world of an ancient humanoid alien visitor seen across all of Earth's ancient cultures. When they arrive, however, the place isn't in the best of shape, with no apparent life forms or, for that matter, superior beings. That is, until someone pokes the proverbial hive and all manner of goo and creepies and crawlies and horrors is unleashed. And yet, when it comes down to it, the aliens and viruses are not the central evil of the film, and for once, it's not Weyland-Yutani either. It turns out the goo and the creepies and crawlies, etc., are merely a tool of the godlike engineers who intend to use them to destroy their own creations, us, and boy do they try. Number 5. 28 Days Later. Danny Boyle's post-apocalyptic horror is a tough watch for a multitude of reasons, bringing zombies home in a whole new way. Jim, Cillian Murphy, wakes up in a London ravaged by a so-called rage virus that has turned people into murderous, super angry, super fast, super infectious creatures, the like of which these lands have never seen outside of Parliament. It doesn't really get much scarier than manic rage zombies, until it does. Though the zombie-creating virus looms large over the entire film, and provides a heap of scares and intense moments, the evil of men eclipses it all. With zombies as the backdrop, Christopher Eccleston's Major Henry West, the leader of a group of renegade soldiers in Manchester, enacts his own campaign of cruelty and evil. Holed up in a fortified mansion that at first appears to be a much-needed sanctuary from the madness outside, it soon becomes apparent that the Major intends to lure some surviving females into sexual slavery in order to repopulate the world, all while giving his men their kips. Frankly, we'd take a zombie world over that one any day. Number 4. Psycho Goreman. Future cult treasure Psycho Goreman offers everything you could want and more from a brutal killer alien feature. It's got a psychotic warlord, Power Ranger-style fights, and a sociopathic little girl, Mimi, played by Nita Josie Hanna, who makes the esteemed galactic conqueror Mr. Gorman, played by Matthew Ninneber, her flunky. And yet, the appropriately titled Psycho doesn't end up being the film's primary antagonist. Sure, he claims that, when free, he will annihilate Mimi and everything she has ever loved, but there's not a whole lot of follow-through. On the other end of things, there is an intergalactic guardian named Pandora, who, while theoretically on the side of good and tasked with hunting down Gorman before he can do any more damage, is also the very being who enslaved the warlord's people in the first place. Far be it from me to say how a film that sees a world-destroying space demon come under the control of a preteen girl is supposed to play out, but despite the big guy's near constant threats of pain, death, and doom, he winds up helping his captors defeat the far more entitled and downright irritating Pandora. Number 3. Let the Right One In. On the face of it all, Thomas Alfredson's Let the Right One In looks like a classic vampire flick, featuring a creature of the night stalking a small community set against the pervasive darkness of a Stockholm winter. But while the sinister and mysterious child vampire Ellie is set up as the film's antagonist, both in the film's first act and its promotional material, it's a little bit more complicated than that. As it turned out, 12-year-old protagonist Oscar has more trouble from his bullies than his friendly neighborhood creature. Beset by misery and the quiet, dark desires that follow from his suffering, Oscar spends his time alone, collecting newspaper clippings about murders and fantasizing of the revenge he's incapable of exacting. It is when he is on his edge, driven out from all places the young boy belongs, that he encounters Ellie. While this could have been a morose tale of tragedy in which Oscar is slain and becomes a vampire himself, the film instead pivots toward a narrative of friendship, romance, and shared trauma. Oscar forms a close bond with Ellie, recognizing an affinity in her otherness, and she winds up saving his life from the film's real antagonist, the bullies. Sure, she also grants him bloody vengeance, but what's a bit of child killing amongst friends? Number 2. Renfield. Chris McKay's Renfield takes a whole different angle on the classic Dracula lackey, positioning the long-suffering servant, played here by Nicholas Hoult, squarely in the 21st century, and in therapy. The film finds him at a critical juncture in his life, reckoning with his enthrallment to his overbearing and eccentric master, Nicolas Cage in all of his camp flamboyant glory. Although Cage's Dracula was all over the posters and trailers and promotional material, menacing a reluctant Renfield and his new friend, Awkwafina's NOPD traffic officer Rebecca, the Prince of Darkness ends up taking on the role of something more like the jilted lover. The real villains of the piece are Ben Schwartz's junior gangster Tedward Lobo and his mother, mafia crime boss Bella Francesca, Shoreya Dashlu. As the film's big bads, the pair are more slapstick than sinister, but they allow Dracula the space to stalk the shadows, flourishing in hilarious little tableaus before swooping in at the last minute to both ruin and save the day. Number 1. Saw X. When fans heard that the Saw series was being resurrected once again for the 2020s, there was only one question on everyone's mind. Which of Jigsaw's secret acolytes was going to be the villain? The first wave of trailers and promotional material, however, had us eating our words, because X did the unthinkable, bringing back Tobin Bell's Jigsaw. With a whole host of new traps and nasty surprises, including an eyeball vacuum that becomes the focal point for the whole marketing campaign, most of us assumed that the prequel would have the master engineer serial killer back in sinister form, laying the hurt on a whole new array of vaguely immoral victims. Not so. While the film has Jigsaw front and center, conceiving of some of his most creative traps and orchestrating some truly brutal bloodshed, he plays a surprisingly emotive second fiddle to this film's secret main villain, the manipulative doctor Cecilia Pedersen. Running a fake cancer center, Pedersen cons the most vulnerable out of their cash before leaving them to die from their debilitating illness. While she puts on something of a sincere face for most of the film, subtly undermining her colleagues in crime, her villainy comes out full force in the final act as, among other things, she locks Jigsaw and a small child into a blood waterboarding trap. Yuck.